Old English period. It happened between 450 AD until 1150. It was also known as the era of the language of Beowulf and the era of King Alfred the Great. One of the legitimate evidence from Old English period was the collections of Beowulf's text. Before we go through the details, we must know that 3,000 years back, the tribe called Celts came to an island and found England. They are also the one who gave the name Britain. They had their language called Celtics, which was spoken in Wales and Scotland at that time. The Old English language were influenced by several languages such as Celtics, Norse, Latin, and German, with many inflections, cases, and gender as the main characteristics. Now let's go through the history timeline of Old English period. Begin in 55 before Christ. It was the time for the Roman invasion. The important thing that happened during this period was that Roman brought Christianity to Britain in the context of Christian worship was tolerated within the Roman Empire. 450 AD. It's the time for the Germanic migration. The important thing was English language had its starts in 499 during the Germanic invasion. German came with four tribes: the Anglos, the Saxons, the Jutes, and Frisian. Those tribes had an influence for the growth of English language. The Old English language acknowledged to be the same with modern Germanic language, especially Frisian, which was spoken in northern Germany. The 6th century. It was a period of Christianization or the missionary, because there are two important people, Pope Gregory I and Saint Augustine. Pope Gregory sent a mission under Saint Augustine, and it was a time when northern England was being converted by missionaries from Ireland. The 8th until 11th century. It was the time for the Scandinavian tribe or the Viking invasion. It was happened between 793 AD until 1066. And King Alfred saved England from the Viking. Because of these invasions, British people start to speak in Old Norse, and the Old Norse gave 2,000 words to the English vocabulary. Three of the examples are egg, gun, and knife. Now we've come to the end of the Old English period. It was the time of the Norman invasions, and French became the only country that ruled England for more than 200 years. It led to 29% of the English vocabularies came from French, such as beef, justice, and people. Another important thing that happened is the Battle of Hastings, which will be explained in detail on the next part.
Battle of Hastings. Battle of Hastings was fought between the Norman-French army of William of Normandy and an English army under Anglo-Saxon Harold Godwinson. It was the beginning of Norman conquest of England. The story began when King Edward was dying on his deathbed. Unfortunately, he was involved in a childless marriage, so he and his wife didn't have any children. He had a close brother-in-law, Harold Godwinson, who was also the Earl of Wessex. Because there were no obvious heir to the throne, Harold thought or insisted that he should be king. However, there was William the Bastard, the Duke of Normandy. One day his father went to see the tanner's daughter, and long story short, there was baby William born out of wedlock, hence the nickname. Edward grew up in Normandy and he and William were best friends. Edward allegedly promised that William could have the English throne after him. So now we have two powerful men who both think they deserve the English throne. Who's gonna be king? But wait a minute! There was Harald Hardrada. This man was the king of Norway, and he was told that an agreement was made saying that when that Viking king died, the king of Norway would get the English throne. Because of this, he thought that he was entitled to the English throne. He was preparing to invade England and be their next king. So now we have three extremely powerful men who all think they deserve to be the next king of England. But who's gonna win? Oh, by the way, Edward died. Harold Godwinson decided to get crowned the same day King Edward was buried. William and Hardrada heard the news and they were furious. They immediately began gathering armies and preparing for an invasion of England. Just one problem though. The wind. It was blowing the opposite way for William and his army. They had to wait in Normandy for about 2 months. Luckily for Hardrada, he and his army landed near the old Viking city of York. He and Harold Godwinson's army began to fight each other until the English eventually defeated Hardrada and killed him. So in this first battle, Hardrada lost and Harold won. Finally, the wind blows the right way for William and his army. They began preparing for their journey to get the English throne. William and his men arrived and landed on the English coast and set up near Hastings. Harold and his exhausted army has to go all the way to south just after their battle with the Vikings. Harold and William met on the 14th of October, 1066. Both sides prepared themselves for the Battle of Hastings. Long story short, because Harold and his army were exhausted, or perhaps for other reasons, Harold was killed and the English were defeated. And William eventually won the battle. He was no longer just a bastard, he was William the Conqueror. England went through a massive transformation under its new Norman rule. One was that English nobles were replaced with Normans. Norman conquest also resulted in the change of language. The Normans brought their dialect of French to England and merged with Old English. The Normans were the ones in power, so words related to power like government, judge, castle, and crown come from Normans. An Anglo-Saxon might buy himself a shirt, while the Norman would purchase a blouse. An Anglo-Saxon might come into a room, but a Norman would enter into a chamber. These Norman origin words are what considered to be posher or more refined. Anglo-Saxon farmers had many cows, pigs, and sheep. But once they're served as a food for the Normans, they became beef, pork, and mutton. Besides that, written English also had a transformation. Since many Anglo-Saxons couldn't write, the written language was romanticized.